Hello, and thank you for joining us today. This will likely be our last webinar for 2021. This has been a really great series, and we're grateful to everybody who has participated either in a panelist or an attendee role or both. And many thanks to all the people who have requested to watch the videos afterwards, either because they missed it or they just loved our content so much they wanted to watch it again. But we are now pivoting back to live events. Yay! So just to encourage everybody to register, we've got the upcoming MBAA NAFA IATA welcome reception slated for October 11th from 5 to 8 p.m. Details are on our website. So if you'd like to register, come join us in Vegas for our first live event in the last couple of years. I'm super excited to be getting back to seeing people in person. Also, if you are interested in sponsoring, we would love your support, and sponsorships are going to close next Monday, September 13th. So hurry up with that. Lastly, my phone is ringing at the most inopportune time, sorry. Lastly, we are scheduled for our 50th annual conference in April in Napa Valley. This has been one of those ongoing things that we've tried to put off for the last couple of years, and we're going to finally make it in April of next year to celebrate 50 annual conferences, our 50th annual. So please come join us, raise a toast, and help us celebrate 50 years of aviation finance. Minor details, if you have questions, you can ask them through the Q&A section of this webinar, and we've turned chat off to minimize distractions. And so now, without further ado, I will turn this over to Lee. Quick overview of our agenda. We're going to do the CARES Act, FAA modernization, and all the changes that are coming down the pike. They are numerous and profound, for lack of a better word. So we'll go through all of that and then hit digital signatures, which are already a part of the system, but also going to be implemented in the new changes with the FAA. And we'll open up to questions. We'll kind of try to take questions as we go. So that's, again, where you put it in the Q&A section. Ask your questions there. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Lee, our moderator, and who will guide us through all this. And Lee, take it from there.
Thanks, Tracy. Welcome, everybody. As Tracy said, I have to say, as we were working together to put this presentation together, there's quite a few things in the works and coming down the line that I think a lot of people may find they were not aware of. And so without taking too much time, just quickly, the panelists we've got from our sort of escrow and registry side, we have Scott McCreary from McAfee and Taft and Bruce Marshall from AIC Title Service. From the legal side, in terms of transactions, we have Ed Kammerer with Greenberg and Trowery. And then from the bank side of this, we have Terry Pinchon from PNC Bank. So we can jump right in. What we're going to start out with, again, is talking about the FAA, Reauthorization Act, how this all, came about, the different aspects of the GAO report. So Scott, I'm going to turn it over to you to get things going.
Okay, well, this is Bruce, and good morning, everybody. Pleased to be part of this presentation today. One of the things about the CARES Act, and that's the Civil Aviation Registry Electronic Services, and this is an initiative that evolved out of the FAA's Reauthorization Act in 2018. At that time, in part of their funding for the FAA, the FAA was mandated to do some upgrades and improvements and modernization of their system within a 3-year period. And some of the things that they were tasked to cover were to take all of the information presently in the FAA's files and records and digitize that information, and then work on their processes, all their paper handling processes, and turn those into digital online processes. They were asked to implement systems that would allow the public to reach in and be able to file and submit information and conduct their transactions electronically, as well as they were tasked with coming up with systems that would allow more efficient, broader access to the registry. Finally, one of the mandates was that within this 3-year period is that you come up with a process for surcharging those persons that continue to use paper transactions. So it was sort of it wasn't just if you build it, they'll come. It was more of if you build it, you better incentivize people in a way to use the new system. There are a couple other things that came out of that, and that would be on the next slide. If we can move to the next slide. That the FAA was also mandated within 180 days to change the re-registration time for non-commercial general aviation aircraft to 7 years. And we had some discussion on our panel about this, and I think, Scott, you had some viewpoints on this. Perhaps you could share those with our members.
Sure, thanks, Bruce. Yeah, I think this is a change that's not implemented yet, but will be, and would be a rather significant change. I think the idea behind the change is that pushing out the registration renewal from 3 years to 7 years for this group of aircraft would cut down on the administrative work that the FAA has to do, right? And as they process documents and they're overworked and understaffed right now as it is. But it's interesting because, we don't know what non-commercial general aviation aircraft will be. We don't know what aircraft will fall within that realm. And, the idea that aircraft, applicants for registration or aircraft registered owners don't have to update their information as much, in a way goes contrary to the direction that the whole CARES program is going, which is, more information more often and more detailed information. So it'll be nice not to have to re-register, all of our, corporate general aviation aircraft every 3 years, but there are a lot of things that need to happen so we know how that's going to work.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, Scott. I think one of the things that happened is that when they came up with the original 3-year renewal program, it was so that they could better track what was happening with aircraft in the system. The FAA themselves didn't know whether aircraft had moved on to their next life being repurposed as Budweiser cans, or perhaps what would happen to some of these aircraft that were either scrapped or perhaps ownership had changed, because you can change ownership of an aircraft through changing ownership of the entity that owns the aircraft without something actually being registered on the FAA and the FAA ever having any knowledge who's actually operating and controlling these aircraft. So I think that there is some argument that's a little counterintuitive, but obviously I think it'll make it easier for people not to have to follow those strict guidelines of redoing things every 3 years and risk having your registrations canceled and not being able to operate your aircraft. The other thing that came out of that is that they designated certain employees of the registry, or asked the registry to designate people that would be exempted if there was a government shutdown on funding. Which I think was a good idea. And I think the FAA did a pretty good job of this the last time around. One thing they did overlook was that the folks that were maintaining their computer systems, some of them were in Kansas City. And when the systems broke down, it created somewhat of an emergency. But I think it got solved very quickly, and it really didn't amount to as big a deal as we thought it might be at the time. If we could move on to the next slide. So the FAA came out with their CARES program, the Registry Modernization Program, and had their vision of what it was going to be in response to the reauthorization that happened in 2018. But then there were some events that I think really significantly impacted and changed the direction, and perhaps changed significantly the FAA's vision of what CARES was going to be all about. And the first of these was a report that was, or an audit that was conducted by, and a report that was issued by the DOT Office of Inspector General in May of 2019. Now, they actually announced this audit back in April the preceding year. And when they did, it was in response, and I don't know if everyone remembers, there were a bunch of scathing articles that were published in the Boston Globe that talked about some issues with the aircraft being, or the FAA being able to track and keep track of, airman certificates, basically the pilots' licenses to operate the aircraft, that, they were being forged, they were being obtained by copies of these certificates were being obtained by terrorists and used for inappropriate activities, as well as they really attacked in these articles the non-citizen trusts and some of the issues involved with that. So the DOT came out, and this is the first time that I know in our office, we actually experienced anyone actually coming to our office to talk to us. We've never had anyone from the FAA registry here in Oklahoma City come out and talk with us. But the DOT sent this team out, and I think we had 5 to 7 people that came out and visited us with us. And it was really a good experience at that time. We told them our thoughts and opinions on what was transpiring and some of the issues that were there. And really it was nice. And they didn't just spend, a few minutes with us. I think they spent an entire morning, and then they moved on to others in the other law firms and title service companies in Oklahoma City. And I believe, Scott, your firm was part of this, and perhaps you can share your experience with this.
Yeah, certainly. We met with the IG folks, the DOT IG folks, and it was a very detailed several-hour discussion with multiple people, and they're certainly very focused on what they were doing. We came away from that meeting, and I think they expressed to us during the meeting that the initial report that the DOT issued was addressing more the computer systems, public access, those sorts of things. Their focus was a little more on Homeland Security, law enforcement, those types of issues, and how do they have the information available at their fingertips to do their job in that regard. And so we've been told, obviously, that report is still pending and should come out, but I haven't heard a timeline for it. Have you, Bruce?
No, I haven't either. We still know it's pending and kind of await seeing that if and when it'll come. But the second thing that happened, probably the most significant audit that occurred, I think Congress wasn't accepting the fact that the DOT was conducting basically an internal audit. For people that aren't aware of the fact, the Federal Aviation Administration is actually an agency, a government agency within the DOT. They roll up into the DOT. And so when this audit was being conducted, it was basically an internal audit. And Congress wanted some more accountability, and they wanted to look at this further. And they tasked the GAO, which is the Government Accountability Office. And basically that office's function, or that agency's function, is to go out and look at other government agencies and audit them, and then report back on what they find to Congress. And this audit happened, I'm not even sure exactly what time it started, but the report was issued in March of 2020. Now, if we look at the timeline, which we mentioned before, back when reauthorization happened in 2018, the FAA had 3 years to act on upgrading and modernizing their system. And now, with only about a year and a half left, the General Accountability Office, the GAO, came out with their report in which they made 15 recommendations that the FAA was tasked to accomplish. And according to the GAO, when this happened, the FAA accepted all of these recommendations. So I think the direction of CARES at that point in time made a significant change in terms of where it was going. Couple key things in the GAO report is that they were very critical of the fact that the FAA was accepting self-certification of a lot of the information that they were receiving. So basically, if someone said, I am or my company qualifies as a US citizen and we certify that we're eligible to own an aircraft, the FAA would accept that without looking into further, background. Are they truly a US citizen? Are they really eligible to own this aircraft? The second thing was the fact that the FAA was really set up to function where they were looking at whether or not forms were actually completed correctly and then rejecting forms that weren't doing this. They weren't really looking at the veracity of and truth of the information that was being submitted on these forms. And so I think the GAO viewed this as problematic when you're dealing with a lot of what they called opaque structures, non-citizen trusts, voting trust, nominee shareholders, and other types of structures where there really wasn't a lot of transparency in the beneficial ownership. So these are some of the really critical issues that were raised by the GAO. And at this point, perhaps, Scott, you'd like to discuss some of the specific findings and things that came out of that?
Certainly. So as Bruce said, the GAO report had 15 recommendations, and the GAO and the FAA have, when it first came out, we looked at the 15 recommendations. We thought, okay, well, those might be, pie in the sky types of recommendations. We don't know really what's going to happen, but we've heard that, they're going to address all of them, and they plan to address all of them either through, whatever action they're going to take internally, but they think they can satisfy and address a number of these through the technology upgrades. A few of the, highlights, one of the recommendations is that the FAA, collect and record information on individual and legal entities. They provided an out for publicly traded entities. So it's still not entirely clear if you have a publicly traded company, do you just check a box and you don't have to provide any more information, or what will a publicly traded company have to provide, and publicly traded where? There are a number of issues like that for discussion. But they're specifically asking for the FAA to collect individual information on any individual or entity that owns 25% or more of an aircraft. We're not sure exactly whether that means just the applicant or the shareholder or its shareholder, how deeply they'll look for that information. But they're certainly going to ask for more information than they do now. And they're looking for detailed information, date of birth, physical address, driver's license, pilot license, tax ID numbers, those sorts of things they're going to collect. There is also a recommendation that they're going to increase fees. So we don't know for sure how much the fees will be increased, but they're certainly going to increase the fees. And another of the recommendations is that the information that is maintained in the ancillary files, the trust files, probably the power of attorney files, those sorts of things, that information is going to be collected more in an electronic format and, subject to their subsequent verification and review, just kind of like the information on an application for registration. So, what are they going to do with all that information? There were a number of recommendations, specific recommendations about that. And I just kind of would summarize them in that it used to be that we would file applications, trust documents, powers of attorney, whatever. And that information may or may not be in the public record. It might be placed in an ancillary file that's kind of harder to get to, but you didn't really know what the FAA would do with the information. You're just submitting it. But we know now that they've been tasked, they're going to verify it. So information that you submit now, there's going to be a verification process. They're going to analyze it. So they're going to analyze the relationship between different owners of different aircraft and different files, and they'll be running data analytics on that information that they obtain, and they're going to share it with other law enforcement agencies. And so, people just need we don't know exactly how quickly that's going to happen, but it's certainly going to be something that it's going to happen, and the industry will need to get their mind around and understand when you submit information to the FAA, that's what's going to happen with it. Another thing that a specific recommendation was that the FAA follow up on the information submitted in declarations of international operation. So as you all know, probably if you're going to fly internationally and you need a fly wire, you have to submit a declaration of international operations that sets out, you know, what airport you're leaving from, where you're going to arrive, and date and time. And for the most part, you know, that information is all accurate. It's all submitted in good faith. But it seems like there might be some instances where people are submitting that type of information and it's not necessarily verified. And the FAA is going to be looking into that now. Next slide, please. Okay, we can just skip that slide. I think we've already addressed most of that. Try to catch up a little bit here. So just what are some of the things that we're in? Could we, next slide, please. So what are the, there we go. So what's some of the information that we're hearing that's not necessarily official, but we really think it's pretty good information and we've got a pretty good idea that this is the way it's going to work. You know, one of the things that we've been told is that the registry will have 24/7 access now. We're not, again, entirely sure about the specifics of that, but we've been told that you're going to be able to file documents and order documents, you know, 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. I'm not exactly sure how I feel about that because I'm not sure how we're going to staff the office to handle those needs or how what the industry is going to expect in connection with those types of demands. What do you think, Bruce?
Well, I think from a practical standpoint, there's always been the issue of, you know, people involved in transactions from overseas, on the East Coast, Central Time, which, you know, coordinates and with the FAA's hours that they're open, as well as on the West Coast. There's always been that issue of trying to get business done with the hours that the FAA were open, that we were able to get information and access that information and keep things flowing. You know, I also think from a practical standpoint, I'm not sure that lenders that get involved in transactions are going to change their hours for wire transactions, that those are suddenly going to become 24/7. But I know in our office, you know, if business keeps up the way it's been over the last year and a half, you know, we've actually had to look at possibly scheduling having people on shifts just to get the work done, just to have office space. We've filled up our current space because of the volume of business. But again, I think it's a mixed bag on that. The 24/7 type of thing suddenly gets everyone where they're on the clock all the time. And you know, it's a mixed bag. I think there's advantages, but there's disadvantages as well.
Right. Another change, you know, they're going to allow every record and index that you could run at the FAA Public Documents Room, you're going to be able to run outside of the Public Documents Room. So that's going to be a big help for the industry. It's going to be a really big help for us because we should be able to order those records and indexes. You know, we're not bottlenecked into doing it at the FAA when the FAA is open. So we're kind of looking forward to that as being able to more efficiently process transactions. One of the bigger things too is that we understand that every party that files documents with the FAA, a party to a document, and I believe the actual parties doing the work, like Bruce's company or our law firm, you're going to have an account that's going to be vetted, sort of like, you know, an account on the International Registry is what it sounds like, where you have to, you know, pre-apply for the account, provide information. I don't know how much information, but you're going to have to provide information. It's going to be vetted, and then you're going to be approved. And then my understanding is that the law firms and title companies that regularly do the filings can then be assigned, like the aircraft owner can assign the ability to do a transaction or a closing to a closing company, but they're gonna have to create their own account. So that'll be a degree of complication and detail that we're not having to do right now. Next slide, please. We've been told, with big question, what about the confidential information that they're requesting? We've been told, which is what we would think, that it will be confidential. It's not going to be public. We've also been told that, although this is supposed to go live in October, I think October 4 of 2021, I think maybe that's not going to happen, but it is going to be implemented in stages. So maybe there will be certain things that happen in October, this coming October, or maybe not, but whatever is implemented, it'll probably be done in stages. And we're hoping that they'll allow the Oklahoma City community to be involved with, pre-testing these things so that we can make sure that we're set up and ready to go, and that we're able to smoothly transition into this new system.
Scott, I have one comment on that. Given the anticipated October launch date, we haven't had any interaction with the folks at the registry in terms of anything that they plan, if they're even going to be capable of initiating something on October 5th. We really haven't had any interaction with them or gotten any feedback or a chance to get feedback on anything that's planned at this stage. So it'll be interesting to see in terms of, as you said, that rollout, whether or not they will get, the biggest users are the 20 or so companies, law firms and title service companies here in Oklahoma City that interact with that system. We're the biggest users of the system. And I don't think there's been a lot of effort at this point to keep us really updated, informed, and again, of the technical aspect of the processes, so that we'll all be ready to go when it happens.
Yeah, Bruce, I would encourage anybody who's joined us today, if they have been contacted or had any interaction, and we'd love to hear about that in order to, see who, if anyone, has been engaged in this transition. So at this point, I think we're going to transition over towards the digital signature area of the presentation.